Okay, guys, welcome to Social Studies today. So the last two lessons, we talked kind of about Manifest Destiny. That was kind of our westward movement. And part of that was when we purchased that huge chunk of land, Louisiana Purchase, our size of our country almost doubled. So when we started our country, we had 13 colonies and it turned into 13 states. But as we began to move westward, more and more states popped up. And the huge divide in our country was, slavery, which we talk about eventually leads us to the Civil War. But I want to talk a little bit about kind of what led up to the Civil War. And it was this divide over, free states and slave states. Okay. So if we go up here, the deep divide about slavery. The United States may have started out with only 13 states, but it would soon begin to grow. As each new state joined the Union, people want to know if it would be a slave state or a free state. The issue of slavery was slowly dividing a wedge to the United States. Abolitionists believed slavery was wrong. They wanted to abolish slavery completely, or at least keep it from spreading by making sure all new states would be free states. It said most slave owners relied on slave labor to run their businesses. They believed they would lose their wealth without slavery, and they wanted new states to allow it. Each side was determined not to let the other side get any advantage. So what this says is a balancing act. There was one thing keeping slavery in check, balancing government. This was achieved by always making sure there was an equal number of free and slave states. It says the balance was critical. Each state got to send two people to the U.S. Senate, just like today. Each state has two senators. An equal number of senators from free states and slave states meant that neither side had an advantage for getting laws passed. But in 1819, this is about 40 years before the Civil War, there was a delicate balance. 11 free states and 12 slave states. So by 1819, we're up from 13 states to 22 states. But then Missouri, a territory that allowed slavery, applied for statehood. So we're going into that territory of the 23rd state, and that's an odd number. So either if it was a free state, that would mean there'd be more senators that would basically be against slavery, or if it was a slave state, then there'd be more senators that were in favor of slavery. So the United States didn't know what to do. So it says a different kind of equality. So Missouri's application triggered an uproar. If a state were admitted, the balance would be gone. After months of debate, the Missouri Compromise saved the day. Missouri would be admitted as a slave state, and a new state, Maine, would be created as a free state. So then what we got to 24. To avoid future problems, they also mapped out which parts of the rest of American territory become slave and free states. For almost 30 years, America kept the balance and most states joined the Union. But by 1850, the U.S. had grown all the way to the Pacific coast. The new land was not subject to the Missouri Compromise, and debate over whether slavery would be allowed in the new territory threatened to tear the nation apart. So when compromise means going backward. When California applied for statehood in 1849, there were 15 slave states and 15 free states. So we're up to 30 by 1849. California wanted to be a free state, but you guessed it, that would upset the balance. The Compromise of 1850 tried to satisfy both sides. California became a free state, but the new territories of Utah and New Mexico would decide for themselves whether to allow slavery. As part of the bargain, slave trading would become illegal in Washington, D.C., the nation's largest slave market. But a new Fugitive Slave Act penalized citizens for helping runaway slaves and required them to cooperate with the process of returning the slaves to their owners. All this kept the nation together for a moment. So we're at 1850 here. So the Civil War is less than 10 years away. Okay, so if we look at this chart right here, you have the free states: Connecticut, Illinois, Indiana, Mass, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, Vermont. Then you have slave states: Alabama, Delaware, Georgia, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maryland, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Virginia. So for the most part, states in the north, most of these are in the north, were free states. And in the south, most of the states were slave states. Delaware is kind of in the middle, and Maryland is kind of in the middle. So basically, you could see at this point, 1820, we were 11 and 11. So the Missouri Compromise left Missouri as a slave state and Maine as a free state. And this, down below, there is a map here, and I want to show you. So let me see. I will try to rotate this for you guys. How did I? Okay. So you can see here, this is in 1820. So these, all the ones labeled were the states. And you can see basically the Louisiana Purchase is kind of all this out here. Arkansas was a territory. Florida wasn't a state yet. Oregon, California, Utah, New Mexico, Colorado, all those current states, they weren't states yet. Okay, so this is a map of the United States 1820. So I want to go back up to okay. I want to show you, got this a little too big. Okay, so by 1850, 3 new states, slave states: Arkansas, Florida, Texas, all in the South. And here are the free states: Iowa, Michigan, Wisconsin. Okay, and then I want you to look at basically this chart right here. So this is a slave population. So in Alabama, the 771,051 were slaves. In Arkansas, of the 209,000, 22% of them were enslaved. Delaware was only 3%. DC was 7%. Florida was 27%. And Georgia was 55%. Kentucky, 22% of this population was enslaved. Louisiana, it was 47%. Maryland was 15%. Missouri was 58%. Missouri was 14%. North Carolina was 33%. South Carolina was 58%. Tennessee was 24%. Texas was 27%. And Virginia was 33%. So what basically it asks you to do here, so it says the Missouri Compromise drew an imaginary line across U.S. territory at 3630 of latitude. New states north of the line would not allow slavery. New states below the line would allow slavery. So when we go to this map, just so you get an idea here. I want to try to show you that line. Got it upside down, I apologize. So the 3630 line is right through here, a little bit below that. So in between 35 and 36 would be right kind of through here. So that's why any of these states above that line, that 3630 line, anything to the north would be free states, and anything south of that 3630 would be slave states. Okay. So what this exercise asks you to do is it asks you just to, let me get this back so you guys can see. It's going to ask you to use the map to basically do some drawing. So it says shade Missouri and Maine with diagonal lines like this. Label Missouri with S because it's a slave state, and F for free. Okay. And then it asks you to find that line, which we just did. That says starting the Mississippi River, draw a dotted line westward to show the 3630 line, and then stop when you basically reach the land controlled by Spain. So this is just kind of a map exercise, you guys. And then it asks you in California to draw cross lines like this. Then find Washington, D.C. and draw a dollar sign with a line through it like this. And these are the new states in 1850. So you would write free for Iowa, Michigan, Wisconsin. You write slave for Arkansas, Florida, Texas. Then basically what it asks you to do is just use like a pie graph on all the slave states to kind of show what the population of basically enslaved population was. So in Arkansas right here, you see this pie graph because Arkansas is about 25%. So that'd be a quarter of, and what that pie graph is showing is in Arkansas, how many people were enslaved. For Alabama, it would be a half. It'd be right in the middle because it's about 51%. You know, for Delaware and DC, it's smaller. So it just asks you for all these states right here to just go ahead and put a pie graph in there showing how many people were enslaved. Just so you get an idea. And I think there's one more map here. And let me circle this one. I think this is the actual pie graph. It's got the circles in there for you. So you're just going to kind of fill that in to see, get an idea of how many people in each of those states were slaves. Okay. So that's about it. So, you know, you guys, we are in the big picture. So this, if we go back up to the last part of the reading. We are to basically about 1850 right here. So obviously the issue of slavery finally came to a head, you know, a decade later, you know, and that leads us into the Civil War, which started, you know, in the 1860s. So the next lesson, we'll look a little bit at the Civil War, but you understand at this point, slavery had become a dominant issue in our country. You know, you had half the states that were for it, half the states were against it. So eventually it came to a head and, you know, the American Civil War started. So we'll talk a little bit about that in our next class. So if you get a chance, just look over those maps. It just gives you an idea kind of where our country was when we went into the Civil War. All right, you guys have a wonderful weekend, and we will see you Monday. Take care.